Guillermo. Emil, I'm to you a little before 5:30. Like I said, usually we're on 2 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday. But I had an appointment. I had a thing I had to do. It turns out I didn't have to do it. And then I said, "Oh, I'm playing this pre-recorded thing at 2 o'clock, talking about Paul Gosar, and Congress did the right thing for once. The House did the right thing. Although, boy, the Republicans put up a fight, and they almost, stopped it. I mean, there was Kevin McCarthy saying, trying to castigate Pelosi and saying, "What are you doing to the institution?" I just could. This is one of those debates that you had to listen to make you realize just how far downhill American politics and our democracy has gone. I mean, when we cannot agree that if you threaten a fellow a member of Congress with some anime drawing showing that you've just killed her, I mean, that's a threat. I mean, that's not a joke. That's a serious thing. And if you cannot get beyond partisanship to come together and say, that is bad. That is the wrong sense of American values. That's a wrong sense of everything about our democracy. There's nothing collegial about it. There's nothing humane about it. It's ugly. It's hateful. It has no place in the rhetoric toolkit of someone who calls himself a leader in our democracy. And Paul Gosar, a member of Congress, they are leaders. Members of Congress are leaders. So Gosar becomes from Arizona, right? And I should have been tipped off like more than a week ago when his sister came on, just reading him the riot act. She went on several of the cable channels talking about what a creeper brother was. And I said, wow, we're too busy talking about all this other stuff that, I didn't have time to talk about Gosar. But I knew it was going to come up again because the House would have to do something to at least tap this guy in the wrist, right? Arizona Congressman Paul Gosar. He now becomes the first member of the House to be formally rebuked in more than a decade. So that means, and there have been some members of Congress who have done some just pretty questionable things, like embracing white supremacy. Remember Steve King, Iowa? He got taken off all his committees. Green, right? The QAnon person. I mean, this is now a trend where Republican members of the House, Republican politicians are adopting this sort of standard hate rhetoric. And the Republicans fought it. They were fighting it today. I mean, they were really going at it with a kind of vigor. The vote passed 223 to 207 to remove Gosar from his two committees. But he's still in Congress. He still has some power. And this is sort of like in between being removed from Congress or expelled and being rebuked. This is being censored. This is serious. You will recall censorship or censor of Donald Trump was an issue when people didn't want to go all the way for impeachment. People thought, oh, let's censor him for his remarks. When he used the asshole countries phrase. I mean, all this is really just because Trump has muddied the political waters. As soon as as the voters let people like Trump in, oh, it's not like people like Trump, it's Trump. When voters let Trump in and Trump won, that's the beginning of the end. Unless you counter with a strong sense of values, a strong sense of moral rectitude. I mean, the real moral rectitude, not the moral rectitude about killing a fetus. How about the moral rectitude over killing a standing member of Congress? That's what Paul Gosar advocated. He'll say, "Oh, that was just an anime cartoon. I put my head over a figure that went off and killed, Ocasio-Cortez. No harm, no foul. Ha ha ha. Joke. Not a joke. Not in this day and age. It's not a joke." And Asian Americans know all too well how it's not a joke, right? I mean, I was just looking through, there was a study. Let's see if the study comes up in my phone. A new analysis of 263 million online conversations in the UK and US on social media sites, blogs, and forums showed how dramatically hate speech increased between 2009 and the mid 2021. And it put anti-Asian hate, the rise in anti-Asian hate speech in 2020 compared with 2019 at 1,662%. This peaked with the announcement of the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020, with references to the virus as the China virus or Kung flu. I mean, it's out there. This feeling of hate. We saw the FBI stats come out the other day, 72% increase over a year for Asian Americans. We got the Stop AAPI Hate statistics that show more than 9,000 instances since the pandemic began. Hate is real in America. I mean, Ocasio-Cortez she's Latinx, but person of color. That hate, that venom that is directed toward her, directed at us. And thank goodness there was Nancy Pelosi, who knew what to do. She didn't waste time. It was about a week, and then now she said, go after Gosar. And then there was Jackie Spear, who got up and she just announced that she's not going to run again. But if you know Jackie Spear's background, she's been the recipient of violence. She knows what violence, toward one's person, what that's about. You don't joke around. You're in Congress, Paul Gosar. You're not on the morning zoo. And this is the big difference. His rhetoric counts a lot. You can't just get away with saying, I'm joking. No, you're not joking because you're a House of Representative. That's why we take you seriously. And, last week, people in Arizona, they knew the difference. The people who Gosar represents, I mean, they're not for it. I don't think. I mean, I couldn't help but think about Kathy Griffin. Remember, she held up the head of Donald Trump, and that was distasteful. But Kathy Griffin, she was she's a comedian. She's a funny comedian. And her career just went down the tube. I mean, she's building it back. She has some health issues now. I love Kathy Griffin. But to see the reaction to her holding up that bloodied head of Trump, and it's clear, it's ketchup, it's clear, it's a joke. She's a comedian. People cut her no slack. They cut her no slack. They were cruel. They were mean, everyone. And, you know, I have to say that people who would ordinarily be sympathetic to Kathy Griffin were also on the, well, it's kind of distasteful. And then the Republicans just buried her. So it's funny, all those people who buried Kathy Griffin, they were practically lifting Paul Gosar up on their shoulders saying, hey, First Amendment, hey, we've got other things to discuss. Inflation, gas prices. No wonder America doesn't like us. Yeah, America doesn't like you, Republican Party, because you're disingenuous, because you will do the self-serving thing all the time instead of banding together with other members of Congress, realizing that Paul Gosar did something wrong here. Not only was he advocating, well, he depicted the death of Ocasio-Cortez, he showed another anime character, you know, with swords against President Biden, assaulting the president. Not a joke. And you know, Gosar says, oh, I'm joking. Hey, come on. Freedom of speech. It's not freedom of speech. This is a threat. It's no more a joke than if you went through the airport claiming you had a bomb in your bag. They'd arrest you right away. That's essentially what we got here. And thank goodness the vote was 223 to 207. That's a lot closer than it should have been. It should have been a slam dunk. Get Paul Gosar out, strip him of his committee assignments. Fortunately, they're not. I mean, he's on the, I think he's on not any of the really big ones. But I'm telling you, you look at how historical this is not an ordinary thing. The vote was 223 to 207, just two Republicans. Liz Cheney of Wyoming, of course, and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois joined the Democrats. David Joyce of Ohio is another Republican. He voted present. So I guess he just wanted to hear his own voice, but he didn't want to take a stand. This is a formal rebuke, censorship. It's even actually, it's more severe than a rebuke. It's censorship. He's allied himself with white nationalists, the first censor since 2010 and only the 24th in the history of the Republic. So it's serious. And this is the real problem, because they're never going to let the Democrats forget this. And there was old Kevin McCarthy from, California, the Republican minority leader, saying it's a abuse of power. And this is going to go down. It's about control. It's about how Nancy Pelosi has destroyed the institution. I'm telling you, you could not listen to the hour and 15 minutes of debate without really getting sick for our country, that we could not even agree on this one thing, that a cartoon advocating violence against Ocasio-Cortez and against the president was just wrong. Just wrong. So we can't agree on that. So hang on to your hat. Democracy is going to get a lot rougher. And of course, the congressmen, or the members of Congress in the debate, of course, mentioned January 6th. Of course. But you know, there's a lot of people who think January 6th was just a walk in the park. Even as today, the guy known as the Shaman gets 41 months. 41 months in jail. So he's like just the latest. And then you have all the people who are Trump's henchmen being subpoenaed and trying to figure out, well, how am I going to avoid getting subpoenaed? How am I going to avoid going to Congress? You have Steve Bannon ignoring the subpoena. He's going to plead not guilty to I guess you can't really plead not guilty to thumbing your nose, but I mean, he just sees himself as totally innocent. You see how crazy it is in our, we can't even agree on right and wrong anymore. That's why I say hang on to your hat. It's going to get rough. And you have a lot of Democrats, older Democrats, traditional Democrats retiring. Patrick Leahy in the House announced his retirement. You had Jackie Spear announcing that she was not going to run again just yesterday. A big blow for California, Asian Americans, Filipino Americans, who her district is San Francisco and the Peninsula. So that's going to be there's going to be a lot of jockeying to see, well, who takes over. So now we have all these censored Republicans who are stripped of their committees. Boy, if they really knew, I mean, if they were really public servants, they'd quit. They'd say, look, I can't serve because I've been reprimanded and I'll go into public life as a white supremacist. I mean, that's what they should say, right? They shouldn't say, I'm going to hang out in Congress some more and do what I can. They should just say, well, that's it. I'm Paul Gosar. I'm going to quit. And maybe Fox News will hire him. And that's, he doesn't belong in the House of Representatives. So I'm telling you, the Stop AAPI Hate thing, all you got to do is just understand that the hate is real. And you got a congressman who's advocating violence. Hey, congressman has no part in that. Not good. So what's next? I think the fallout. But if you can, go to C-SPAN, look at that debate, see the arguments that people made. Oh, it's not so bad. This is a cartoon. We got people paying $4 for gas, $5 for gas. We got people complaining about real things. This is why people don't like Congress. No, people don't like Congress because they refuse to have common sense. They refuse, the Republicans refused to reprimand their own. That's what should have happened. What should have happened is the Republican leadership in the House should have taken Gosar aside and say, "Look, buddy, you crossed the line. You crossed the line. Get the heck out of here." They didn't. They defended him. That's got to come back and bite him. You would hope that it, but there they were saying, Gosar, no remorse. I reject the false narrative categorically, he said. Just absolute BS. All right. So, a couple other things just worth mentioning. This is going to be a short show. Some things I wanted to mention. I told you about the QAnon shaman sentenced to 41 months in prison. A couple other things. The bishops, the Catholic bishops. This is good for our Filipino Catholics out there. The Catholics say that just because you might believe in abortion, some politicians may believe in abortion, doesn't mean they can't be offered communion. So Biden's clear there. Now, when all these things compete for headline space and news space, then some of the ones that were hot a couple days ago kind of were waiting for the jury to deliberate. The jurors went back home, no verdict. But while the jury was deliberating, the defense team sought a mistrial the second time, and the judge has yet to rule. And the judge, according to reports, the judge says that he could rule on the request for a mistrial at any time, including after a verdict. He says it has to be addressed if there is a guilty verdict on any degree on that count, he said of the motion. So he's playing it cool, but I see the headline, defense ruling a second time for a mistrial. I guess it's to get a bit of the headlines. Will it matter? Does it have any impact? It's up to the judge, and he says he could rule at any time, including after the verdict. So it really is on the 7 women and 5 men who are on that jury. I'm not surprised it's taking this long, given the amount of, the confusion around the instructions. They're going over them. They're making sure they understand. But believe me, it seems like people are talking about how we probably will have a lot more trials like this when it comes down to, what can people do with a gun? Is he an active shooter? Is it self-defense? I think we're going to see a lot more of these kind of cases coming down the pike, given the proliferation of guns in our society. This is practice. A couple other things. Here in California, I used to be an adjunct lecturer. You call me professor, not doctor, but Professor Guillermo. I always felt uneasy being called professor. Just call me Emil. And so the lecturers at UC were prepared to strike today and tomorrow, and they got a contract instead. I got to go check out what the contract is, but apparently it's a good one. It averted the strike. But you know that this is one of the problems with research institutions, that a lot of the teaching is done by people who aren't necessarily the big time PhDs. I mean, it's two different things. You're either a good researcher, PhD type, lots of books, lots of research, or you're a good teacher. It's rare when you're both. And of course, the good teachers are they're gold in college because you find a good teacher in your 4-year college and you just glom onto them. They become your companions. And then of course, when they're lecturers, they don't get tenure. And say you're 10, 15 years out of college, you say, God, Bob Jones, he was the greatest teacher in U.S. history, and maybe he'll give me a recommendation for the. Oh, he didn't get tenure. Where is he? Oh, he's no longer in higher ed. He's in book sales now or something. I mean, that's what happens. Lecturers, if you want to be a career lecturer, you just don't have that kind of stability. You don't have the pay. You don't have the security. So if the contract was good enough to avert a strike, then looks like UC has come to its senses that, hey, look, you got a lot of these people who are just good teachers, not necessarily the marquee researchers, but they are the people who are going to bond your school with, they're going to be the lasting memory with these students, the classroom experience, not the big names that come in and lecture once a week and have TAs correct all the papers. It's the lecturers who meet in small classes, connect with students. That's the college experience. Can't tell you how many times I had great lecturers, but they weren't full-time. They were my college experience, but it was just temporary. I don't know. Well, some of them have passed on, but that was always one of the problems. The big name profs, the marquee guys, I didn't come close to them. All right. The Tiger King, the sequel's coming out. I do the PETA podcast. I'm going to talk to some about the Tiger King, the inside dope about the people involved in the Tiger King. That drops next week, but I talk to them tomorrow. In the meantime, there's a piece in the Washington Post, A Dog's Life. You should check that out. Gene Weingarten wrote it. This week's PETA podcast, I talked to the woman who runs the program that saves dogs that are chained up to the backyards. There should be a law, right? Yeah, you can't abandon your dog 24/7 to a chain in the backyard. There are anti-tethering laws in some jurisdictions. It's cruel. And listen to the PETA podcast, and you'll find out just how cruel some people are, tying their dogs to a chain outside. And then this Pulitzer-winning reporter, Gene Weingarten, followed PETA around in the Norfolk, Virginia area as they administered to these dogs and tried to save some. And his story is just will make you think about how we treat our dogs and how sometimes we don't really understand the agency they have, that they have the right to a life, they have a right to a better dog bone, for goodness sakes. They are so beholden to you as the owner. And what do? Well, the best of you care for your dogs. But you'd be surprised how many are just outright cruel to their dogs. It's not man's best friend. So, A Dog's Life, Washington Post, Gene Weingarten, and then check out the PETA podcast and find out what PETA does to solve the chain dog problem. Okay, that's it. Hey, look, a little short show today. Part two. I just had to come on and talk about the censor of Gosar, because it affects us. It affects Asian Americans. It does. Because if that hate is allowed to stand unchecked, we know how hate festers. We know how we become targeted. This is the time we have to stand in coalition with all those who understand how ugly, how vicious that cartoon that was released by Paul Gosar, representative of Arizona, was. So, all right. Thank you for joining me. This is what I like to call the Micro Talk Show, the API, the AXs. Back again tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pacific live. We're here Monday through Friday because, it's dangerous to go live. And I'm going to play around with like coming on at different times of the day, because sometimes people are with me at 2 p.m. Pacific, but sometimes they may be with me at 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific. But I do appreciate you being here. Check us out on all our different venues. Facebook at emilguillermo.media. Get you all the shows. Just trip them up one after the other and just say, it's interesting. Oh, he said this about Cuomo and Cuomosexuals? Oh. Listen to it like radio. Like, your favorite talk radio show. I'm sure you have one. Or, while you're doing the dishes or while you're trying to do something and just need some, not white noise. It wouldn't be white noise. It'd be kind of like brown noise. Put some brown noise in the background. So back again tomorrow. If you've come to this point of the show, this is the time when, we apply a little self-compassion, because sometimes at the end of the day, especially, people are wondering, I don't know. It's like sometimes I feel like I don't belong. Sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough. Sometimes I feel like, what the heck's going on with my life? Hey, look, you're okay. You're good. Hang in there. Just start and keep going. Keep going. Don't stop. You're good enough. You're not perfect. No one's perfect. But you're good enough. Keep going. Remember that. Remember, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Till next time. Mahaka.